So, you guys keen for the next question, or you want to make any more comments on that?
Yeah, no, I'm keen to go as soon as we can. One thing that is happening at the moment, maybe we should just... oh, it does say we're live. So YouTube has been not very nice to us in terms of it's not working properly.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that.
I did struggle with YouTube, but Facebook was tight.
Oh, no,
Facebook's my baby.
Now it was just like streamed less than a minute ago. All right, I don't even know. I might.
So there's going to be like a
5-minute
delay or something.
Well,
it's up on mine.
Worst case, we'll I'm recording it as well, so we'll upload it after. So yeah, let's just jump right in. Oh, I've got to fix Ben's thing. So this is another fun part of is streaming is trying to fix the stuff that happens live in terms of
a little video just giving you that border again.
Yeah, it's like getting bigger and smaller.
Every time we nail something.
It's I can't make it stay still. Oh gosh. All right, I'm just gonna leave it. Let's go.
You try that. Fiddle around, try fix it. I'll try. What was the next bit, Kip?
Well, yeah, I'll ask the next question.
Keep us on track.
But while I ask this next question, do you want to try do a screen share to Discord so people can, watch us live instead of having to wait, 5 or 10 minutes, however long for the
screen share to Discord. I mean, I can. So we go to this bad BZ. Oh, that's a big one.
I'll let you figure that out in silence if that's all right.
Well, this is the Discord, right? Oh, you've got the other screen share because it's what do you call it? On Skype, not on OBS. What's going on? Connor asks.
Yeah. Anyway, while Max is figuring this out, another shout out to the Discord. We have a really great community. If you're a developer, please jump on the Discord as well. We've got lots of dev projects happening. And projects.
Volunteer projects.
Yeah, volunteer projects, social media
Information resource.
Yep.
All right,
Great place to hang out with friendly people.
Mm-hmm.
How are we doing with those questions?
Yeah, all right, next question. So this question is about the app. So obviously a lot of people are going to be asking and wondering about the app. And what is the app, some of the nuances on how we use the app and the different roles the app will have. So I'm going to put it in context of what I call the stages. So recently, when we were thinking about app development, we realized that the app, which is on the GitHub repository, it's in the Flux GitHub repository. Is that what it's called? Flux?
Yep.
Anyway, link will come in the chat. And essentially, that repository is going to be built upon to eventually bring IBDD. Now, at the moment, it simply serves as a member portal for Australian Flux members. So it's exclusive to the Australian Flux members at the moment. But in the future, it'll be open to everyone, not just members of the Flux Party. So Ben and I kind of broke it down into these 3 stages. The first being the member portal, the second one being a Parliamentary Mirror app. That's where we get the current bills going through Parliament and present them for locals like you and me to vote upon. And then the results per constituent will be published and emailed to your local representatives. So we can say, your member is not in line with your constituent, what's going on, etc. And then the third stage is IBDD, and that's when we actually have a Flux proxy or Flux representative in one of the Australian parliaments. And so, my question is, what is the scope of each stage?
I mean, you just ask a lot with a few words there. Any stages are pragmatic. right? In terms of the thing that matters is the end goal. That's just like, I mean, it's sort of the nature of doing anything like this. The parliamentary app, the Parliamentary Mirror, the reason for doing that is to prove the tech, to get people interested. There's some like aside effects, like a polling type thing. When we having integration with the voter roll and making sure that people are validated and stuff is sort of nice, because right now with polls we don't get that necessarily. So there's stuff like that. In terms of scope,
don't downplay it. It's like the most powerful polling system ever released. Please, brand it.
I mean, that remains to be seen, but I really hope so.
But it's for hype and for advertising as well, right?
Yeah. And within the best world, it would have a impact on the way people lobby their representatives.
Well, that's one of the ideas that sort of come up has been, this is a way to, like, you know, you can imagine for every issue that goes before Parliament, we poll people, and then we have essentially a bot that emails the representatives who voted on the issue, or who didn't vote on the issue, and says, this is how your constituency voted, this is how you voted. This is your historical record, and we can make that public as well.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you didn't vote on this, shame on you, your constituency is 75% in favour. It's one of those things where it's not, like, that's not our core mission, but it's definitely a good way to create some attention for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And hype is super important as well, especially for a movement, because for a movement, you need people. For people, you need interest, and interest, you need hype.
Yeah.
So that's the second stage. That's the Parliamentary Mirror. Third stage, IBDD. We've got a representative in Parliament. What does that look like?
What that looks like is, for the most part, probably what people imagine. You get an app, you vote, you choose whether you like and dislike issues. If you like them, or you can choose just to delegate to someone and not ever vote, that's fine too.
Yep.
But that's basically what you'd imagine, is you get yes, no on everything that comes through Parliament. You get the links to issues, you get links to people who have either made summaries or giving opinions or news articles or whatever else. That's just like a general aggregator. We can't really be the gatekeepers of any of that information. That has to be sort of, I guess, openly submissible. So yeah, that's the general idea. What that looks like, though, is the main important or interesting part of that journey is when we're in the balance of power and a contentious issue comes up. Because at that point, anyone who cares about it, their only incentive is their only way besides traditional lobbying to influence it is to start participating. And so a lot of the thing that we've got to, I guess, keep in mind as we move forward is creating these onboarding cycles, I guess, or these incentive maelstroms almost, that sort of suck people in by giving them an option. And then if they want to have a say, then literally we are the only option. So that sort of sounds chaotic maybe, but the reality is the only way that we're going to get from this to anything else is with a form of organized chaos, and that's what IBDD is.
It's worth noting there, little thing I was kind of thinking as you're talking, when we talk about stage 3, that stage 3, and correct me if I'm wrong, will only be applicable in the legislation and according to an elected member of Parliament. So it will run presumably side by side with stage 2 for the rest of Australia.
Yeah, no, there's no reason we would turn off stage 2.
Yeah.
I just got to say, Nathan's in the chat, Nathan Waters, he says +1 on mirror strategy. He has been one of the strongest advocates of that, and we actually spent a little while last Christmas sort of talking about that and strategizing what it would look like, and then doing a bunch of research into how the Australian Parliament website worked, and realized that, man, it is hard to scrape the issues and whatever else that come out of that and provide anything meaningful for people. But
you thought so.
It's so Kips actually done some work on that recently.
Yeah, I came down like an angel blessing you with sweet
data.
rating. Yeah, sweet data. Actually, fun fact, another plug for the Discord. So we actually have a bot that already mirrors the current bills into Discord channels, and you can upvote and downvote. When I say upvote and downvote, I mean like yes and no. The current bills, agree, disagree. Yeah, I strategically changed upvote and downvote because of what you said earlier, Max. It's a Reddit thing. I don't know.
No. I mean, like upvote, downvote is, I guess part of the thing is, you don't want to, like, there's a lot of, with any voting system, whether that's like Reddit or like just Facebook likes and Twitter retweets or however it is, any expression of sentiment, you end up taking a lot of baggage with you because of the system you choose. And so that's sort of the thing that we've got to be careful about when we implement stuff that's a bit more serious, in terms of either providing, saying like this is like accurate polling of the Australian people, or this is how IBDD is actually in operation. There's the potential for us to make mistakes that we can't undo at that point. So obviously we've got to take it seriously.
So that actually feeds into another third stage question, which is, I guess, extra features that could come along with a third stage of the app. So, for example, forums, to kind of, I guess, provide an alternative to mainstream media. As we all know, there should be better ways of getting out information than just what we see on the telly. And should Flux and the app be providing some sort of organic, I'm not saying, we, write the articles, but an organic means for, people to publish ideas and for them to be upvoted or downvoted. What do you think?
Upvoting and downvoting, I think, is a bit too simple. And that's why, Reddit's gone through a lot of teething issues about this as well, where they've tried to make things more personalized, right? In terms of identify what do you like to upvote, and then find other content that other people who upvote similarly to you like, and then show you that, as opposed to showing you all the content that people who upvote the stuff you don't like and downvote the stuff you like, what they like.
Yeah. But in terms of providing a forum?
Absolutely. I mean, the main thing is that people are going to come to us looking for ways to find information about issues. Is they're going to it feels a bit pointless to go to an app and there's like do you like or dislike this? Do you vote yes or no? And that's all you get. There's just no links to anything else, whatever. The main thing, I think, is that we need to be impartial about the information that's provided. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't have a way to focus on things that they identify with, in terms of, they really like one commentator. We shouldn't stand in the way trying to stop them, consuming that content. But at the same time, what we put forward can't be just what we like as such. So how we do that is, I guess, a bit up in the air. I don't think echo chambers are ultimately very good for politics, so it's unlikely that it's just going to be a learning algorithm type thing. But I think a forum is really important. I also think anonymous discussion is really important, where people can participate in a way that the burden of ownership of the idea is taken away. And one of the
optional anonymous, right?
Well, there'd be a different part of the forum if we were just talking about a simple text forum. Different part of the forum for that. I guess there's no reason they shouldn't interact. That's fine. But it's definitely important for people to be able to. So this is one of the ideas that sort of came out of the Enlightenment, was that ideas die in our place. In that you putting forward an idea is no longer a statement that if this idea is wrong, then I am wrong, sort of thing, or that if this idea is wrong and it goes against the state or the church or whatever else, then I'm potentially imprisoned for it or worse. The idea that ideas die in our place, one of the things that is necessary for that, sorry if you can hear a siren in the background, by the way, but one of the things that is necessary for that is the ability to put forward an idea whether you believe it or not. And sometimes that's just, I have discussions like this where you take a hypothetical stance, where you say, I'm playing with this idea. I don't necessarily believe it, but I want to explore it. And you play the advocate, and someone else plays the devil's advocate.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. When
So,
I was, yeah,
well,
go on,
just
Ben.
tying into that like conversation of real world, or like, our immediate release schedule, or what we'll be using immediately. It's also worth noting that like as much as we don't want to be the key holders to truth or the gatekeepers to any sort of knowledge, but the flip of that is, like you say, either completely anonymous content or completely unmoderated content. And the reality of actually, pushing people towards completely unmoderated content when we are a start out party that's,
It's
only
no
just
one's going to buy it,
discussing
right?
current issues. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is that area where it's better for us to go with, we aren't the holders of information. We allow you to vote right now. You need to find your informations, and then, whether we eventually pick up that area, that being the people you can drop that information for others to look at. It's a very long process, I would think. In the best way, it was like, you don't want to be sending your mum to live leak.
I mean,
That was like the best way it was put, and I was like, that's so true. Even though you never want anything to be censored, or you don't want anyone to be. Yeah.
It absolutely is a long process, but it's also one of those things where, like, we can't fill those shoes on day one. But it's something that's going to be necessary. At the same time, the option of always being able to explore that is really important. To embrace unmoderatedness in full, I think is a bit pointless, because you can have an unmoderated forum next to a moderated forum, and if people prefer the moderated forum, particularly like some people prefer it, then that's not necessarily bad. Like, provided that still has high quality discussion, and for most things you don't need a heavily moderated forum for high quality discussion. Maybe some things, and I think the real danger comes when moderators take the policing of topics themselves into their own hands, as opposed to the method of communication. But we can stay away from that. That's not too difficult for us, particularly because we've from the get-go, it's been we are impartial. That's like a key aim of Flux from the get-go.
And maybe the the moderation rules could be voted upon as well.
Oh, that's dangerous, because you end up with how do you vote on it? With one of the ideas behind issue-based direct democracy is that you need a diversity of issues to make it work. You need enough incentive for people to
but it doesn't have to be
specialize.
IBDD, right?
No, but if you just go with plain democracy, then you can end up with a tyranny of the majority, and that's not good either. So you don't want that. And so voting on moderation rules without any limits would certainly be a mistake, but I see no reason that communities shouldn't be able to decide their own moderation rules. I mean, that's essentially what Reddit does, right, in terms of the subreddit moderation, not in terms of the global moderation, which is a different thing.
Yep. Good answers. So if we're willing to dive deeper into the rabbit hole,
maybe
stage.
I was just going to say, maybe we should just, Josephine's just mentioned that her biggest concern of Flux working is the age of misinformation. So I guess hashtag fake news, and people sourcing their own reality through research without it ever being factually checked. So this is, my view on this is that it's a really difficult problem to solve if you're looking at it from the point of view of, we want all published information to be of a certain accuracy, or to be of a certain standard. Published information is difficult to control. However, what you can do is you can penalize people for taking a risk on information, maybe is the way to put it. It's difficult to make a judgment that information is good or bad, or maybe saying information is a bit too generous, but it's difficult to make a judgment on the statements and reports and articles that people publish being good or bad in a general sense. But it is easy to say that if you want to believe something, then you've got to stand by it, and you've got to accept the consequences of believing it. And if those consequences are that you are less effective politically, then that maybe is the way to solve it, is that we don't solve it directly in a political sense. Solving it directly is really difficult, because you have to deal with the nature of content and opinion and conjecture, and to do that without becoming like a force of censorship or like an authoritarian sort of I mean, state is what I sort of come to, but obviously Flux is not in that position yet. But to try and approach it from those points of view is really dangerous. But to provide a sort of system where adopting those views means that you risk a lot politically, and that risk usually, in the case of misinformation, translates to being less effective, I think is a pretty strong feedback mechanism. It's the same as like if someone has a really bad idea about how to build a car, right? And they're like, okay, I'm going to use this, toothpicks and bubble gum and whatever else to build this car. Then you can't imagine that it's really going to go far or stand up or whatever else. And as long as people can accept the responsibility of that attempt, then I don't really have a problem with it. If people want to believe something that's false, but they'll accept the impact for that, then from a point of view of a political system, it's hard to argue against, I think. Obviously, as people, we have a bit more of an emotional response, and we don't want that because there's a better way for us to be together, essentially, to work in a society. But from a political point of view, because the danger of preventing rational debate from any viewpoint, even those things that might seem very unintuitive or outright wrong, the danger of preventing that, which is really censorship, is so great. I think it's better to have a system that just enforces the idea that you've got to have ideas that are consistent with reality, and if you believe something that's not consistent with reality, then you're going to wear the impact of that, and that's the better way to do it.
Yep, awesome answer. And then on top of that, also if unforeseen consequences, obviously every legislation has unforeseen consequences, I think Flux will also provide a mechanism to quickly correct for unforeseen consequences, being a more direct.
Well, that's a big part of what the design is about, is that to unforeseen consequences are a part of progress, and really what that means is if you try to make progress, you're going to make mistakes. You can't avoid mistakes entirely. With careful planning, you can do pretty well in that you can avoid the mistakes that some of us knew that we already could avoid. I think maybe one of the greatest travesties of democracy today is that we make mistakes that some people knew we could avoid, and we didn't listen to those people. Sometimes those people are in the minority as well. And so that's part of why issue-based direct democracy is issue-based, and it's structured like it is to be able to give those people who do think that we're doing something wrong in a particular thing, who think that we can avoid a mistake that we would otherwise make, give them a better chance to make that clear and to prevent that.
Yep.
But you can't absolutely avoid mistakes. It's a nature of progress that the future is unpredictable, and to try and venture into something that's unknown, how are we going to do that in an infallible way? We can't. So the other part of issue-based direct democracy, to do with the way that people are empowered and the way that we handle issues, is that we really want a quick cycle time when it comes to problems or policy and solutions. So if something has come up that's an issue, particularly, especially when there's small fixes, we really want to enable those, because those sort of things can, like the benefits of those small fixes stack into the future. They really help us going forward in a repeated sense. And so without doing that, we are essentially accumulating debt. But if we do that, then we're accumulating an asset, that asset being like well-structured, good policy. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. It's something that our current democracies don't really focus on, to the detriment of all of us.
Yeah, and that kind of feeds into discussing a potential fourth stage, and I like to imagine this fourth stage of the app. If you've just joined us, we're talking about stages of the app, and the fourth stage is when we either have a majority or completely own the parliament with Flux proxies, Flux representatives, and I guess the whole, reason for representatives in a classical sense is gone. And so obviously things with owning the whole parliament, especially in Australia, is that we also have to control the executive arm. So is that something that Flux intends to address?
The executive branch is a total. It's a very different problem.
Yep.
One of the things that sort of I find a bit humorous about the executive branch is the you have I guess what almost seems like self-referential tension in that there's frustrations about changes of administrations, there's frustrations about the bureaucracy, there's frustrations about not being able to do things, but then there's frustrations about having to do things as well. The executive branch, I think on the whole, most of the people that I've met in in the public service aren't particularly interested in the political outcomes that politicians are interested in. They're not interested in corruption or political gain. They're interested in their job. And so I feel like the first and foremost idea there is not to touch it too much.
Yep.
Like, the main thing is, what are the problems in the executive branch that do not come from legislative agenda? Because all of those problems we already take care of. In terms of the other stuff, I mean, a lot of it seems like organizational, project management type stuff or economic theory type stuff. Those are things that we can deal with outside of changing the political system at all. That can be dealt with in the same way that a new CEO can change a company or ruin it. In the same way, I mean, you could argue that our parliamentarians are the CEOs of the executive branch, but I don't think that's really the case. They're more like 51% of the board. So, I feel like that's a separate problem, and it's not the problem that we're particularly concerned about. What we are concerned about is that if someone does have a great idea about how the executive branch should be run, issue-based direct democracy is a fantastic way to get that heard and get that enacted.
Yep. And so is the Flux movement itself. So if you have, we love ideas, so please, join us, voice your ideas. But yeah, obviously the fourth stage of the app is so far away that it's almost not worth talking about it, but it is worth thinking.
It's far away till it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. All right, so there were kind of some deep general questions. I don't know, Ben, if you want to make quick comments before we change to the next questions, or...
Not really. Just that I'm keeping an eye on our chat. If anyone has any questions, I'll pass them up. But this is good. Again, going too deep on that stage 4, but it's good. It's what we need to do.
All right, great. So this question is more of a personal question for you, Max. So as part of the Flux Party leadership, and Flux movement leadership, if you will, as well. Do you feel as though you need to reserve some political opinions that you might have and and not necessarily voice them publicly?
Yeah, I mean, all the time.
Yeah.
There's very few things that I have strong opinions about that I talk about publicly, particularly because that is it's a distraction from what, as somewhat of a public figure, I am advocating a particular thing. I'm not advocating my other views. I have plenty of other views, but they're not as interesting. They're not as important. They are important in general, but as a comparative situation, I'd prefer that I can promote Flux unadulterated as such without letting my own views pollute it. And that's a really important part of it, is that my views are not my views, regardless of what they are not more important than Flux. They're not more important than the instantiation of better problem solving skills society wide, or I guess society wide is maybe an ambiguous term, but in terms of the way that society solves problems, though the improvement of that is far more important than anything that I believe is either a pet issue or my other views on big topics. There are people out there who profess those views. I don't need to do it.
Yeah, and I suppose you can always revert back to voicing your opinions anonymously.
Yep. I don't typically, but I usually just keep it to friends and things like that.
Yep. But you've got to remember, Google's always listening. So if you're going to do it,
well, as we found out setting up for the stream, where I had to figure out how to turn off the OK Google thing, which luckily it's not activating now. So, but man, that's a mess.
We've got a good question from Tarek that might Flux lead to a more erratic politic where public whim becomes volatile and difficult for other countries to negotiate with. So again, this is deep into post having decent control in Parliament.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a difficult question. I do want to mention as well. We do have other things in chat here. So we've just got Mofasine down in Melbourne, who's involved in the Designing Open Democracy. Involved is an understatement, really. He's been driving it for a while, but so thank you for tuning in. We've also got Ryan, who's asked, what's your opinion on the effectiveness of IBDD regarding economic versus social issues and those that bridge both, like climate change? So one thing, Ryan, when we do talk about this, I like to take the Adani mine as an example of the difficulties of these sort of issues, both because it's smaller in scope. I don't have a particular opinion on it, or at least I don't profess one, and it's something that we can tackle. So maybe I might just add those to the little list we've got here. Apologies for the horrible color in that in the chat there. So we'll go with Tarek's because that's where we're at now. So one thing, copying these questions is sometimes it is there. It's just in white text.
It's low-key been a pain, but I've been trying to struggle through it in the background.
Man, it's I gotta say, we've definitely got some things to iron out. Is there like a...
That's the pilot. We'll iron them out.
All right, Ben, can you Control-A that and remove the formatting? So might Flux lead to a more erratic politic? So yes and no in that... sorry, Kip, was there anything?
Oh, no. You just dropped out for a second.
Oh, okay, sorry. So the idea of becoming more erratic, if you tried to look at... So this is sort of the aside case, the not as important one, I think. If you tried to look at the decisions that a country or like a political body makes as a consistent thing, so that like every decision on every issue was consistent with each other, even though lots of the issues were independent. From that point of view, then yes, it's almost trivially going to become more erratic, but I don't think that's the meaningful sense of the question or the words. The better way to think of it is like the erraticism, if that's a word, for the way that people, or the way that decisions are going to be made, the way that things are going to go forward, that is, I think, going to be maybe more just in its variance. It's going to, when it changes, it's going to be for good reason. When it seems like there's a chaos in the way that people are making decisions, it'll be because there's good reason for that chaos. So like an example of this, so if you take something like Brexit, a incredibly divisive issue, very important for the future of a country, there are, like, the vote came out one way, and then a whole bunch of people said, wait, can we vote again? Now, to be fair, they probably should have just voted the first time. However, if you make a decision and it's down, and it's a small margin between the yes and no vote, it's a really big decision, and there's significant reason to believe that you would get a different outcome the second time, it's hard to argue that you shouldn't have like a level of erraticism there, or that you shouldn't be erratic to the point of at least running it a second time. That's maybe difficult to modern democracies don't act like that, but modern democracies also don't solve these problems effectively, or at least not to people's satisfaction. So being erratic in this way, I don't think is bad. I think that's perfectly acceptable. In terms of where, I guess, one of the things to expect from day-to-day sort of voting in Flux is that the outcome of an issue that is presented one week and then someone proposes that it be undone the next week, like those outcomes can seem contradictory. But that's not because the country isn't able to make up its mind, or that neither idea is good, or one of them isn't good and one of them is, or anything else like that. That's simply that people need to be able to adjust and readjust their expectations and efforts, and be able to try and do so in a pragmatic way. If something is coming up and you think that there are enough people to take care of it, then it's often a good use of your time and energy not to focus on that thing. So an example of this is if you're, say, someone who's very skilled in trying to, or in solving like malaria, for example, in Africa, then donating your time to the efforts to combat like the bushfires in Australia at the moment is not necessarily a great use of your time. Like, yes, it's an important issue, but the opportunity cost of you diverting your attention there is maybe worse. Whether it is or not is up to this hypothetical person in this hypothetical case. But it is the case that if things got particularly better or worse on one side of those, then people can change their mind. And part of that, in a political sense, is to do with the way that you perceive, or the data available about how everyone else behaves. And so if you have an assumption, or maybe you have really good reasons for believing that society, or that the voting population, better term, the voting population is going to behave a certain way, then basing your chosen behavior on that is not a bad idea, but you can be wrong. And so what that means when we're talking about issue-based direct democracy is that we can, like, there are plenty of examples or foreseeable situations where it would be the case that the votes could like go back and forward, essentially on the same issue through multiple iterations. But that's not bad. That's essentially it's a correction. It's a way of realigning people's political energy in favor of the outcomes that are really are actually important to them, that were not previously seen as important because of the way that they perceive the situation. So being erratic is not bad, I guess, is what I'm saying there. It's about context. Being erratic without reason, without direction, is bad. Because there's no reason for you to be erratic. There's no like a good outcome that you would expect to happen by you being erratic that wouldn't happen by you like acting sensibly. So I guess, yeah, it's a difficult thing to sort of think about. It's an unpredictable situation. It's not something that we can easily say that this is going to be good or bad, but we can say that the inability to change or the inability to react to new information is bad. And so being erratic in that regard is, I think, or rather the ability to be erratic is important for the problem-solving cycle of society.
Okay.
That's completely right, because sometimes the best solution is the not very well thought out, or not the majority's opinion on that solution. So yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say like that your summary sentence was pretty perfect, but just to add to it that Max's summary sentence, but just to add that, and given that, the best thing you can do is create a system that takes that into account, and is best able to react to and negate the negatives from it as quickly as possible, which is something that, as much as it allows erraticness,
it's a word.
Yeah,
it is.
By allowing that, it also allows the fix to develop itself as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we didn't really, by the way, talk about the idea of countries negotiating with other countries and things. I think that's a much deeper sort of topic. Diplomacy is not going to go away. But at the same time, similar to inside a country, if you want something to happen, you're going to have to negotiate far more with the people than with a singular person who holds power, and that radically changes the dynamic.
Mm. Yep. All right. Wow. How are we feeling? We're feeling good to crack on.
Yeah. Here we go.
Yep. All right. Well, the next question's the personal question for you, Ben. So, so essentially, so if anyone didn't know, Ben helps maintain the Flux Party social media presence. So anything that you see on Facebook or Instagram or
any of his super mean DMs, I read every single one of them.
Yep. So the question is, obviously through those mediums, you're representing Flux. How do you manage to navigate putting out content that is engaging whilst at the same time, not seeming for or against a particular issue?
Oh, it's kind of been a hard one. I mean, like, to be honest, I'm just lucky that there are so many pertinent issues coming up nowadays, where I'm just reporting on the news. But yeah, it is very hard to not delve deep into political issues as a political party. It's what people expect, and I guess it's especially what people come to a social media account of a political party. So yeah, it's been pretty hard, but we've got building a volunteer team to check off that has multiple. The party has so many political biases and political ideologies that we try to reach out to everyone, make sure we're taking suggestions from everyone. So again, yeah, if you're on the Facebook, Instagram, the YouTube, you can suggest articles or feel free to call me out if you think I've got a bias. And as always, join our Discord, discord.io/Flux Party. And yeah, we have a ability for people to suggest articles or suggest topics that we can talk about. But other than that, I mean, people know what we're about, hopefully.
Yeah, because I have noticed that one of your strategies is to, put a link to some sort of contentious issue and simply pose a question, because posing a question is technically not biased, is it? It's, OMG, this is outrageous. But how is outrageous? We're not specifying, right?
Yeah, pretty much. We're very much like a, what do you think? Or how would you, if you could decide, which, is the very bare bones, like, core of our party. So I'm staying on message. It's a lot of that. And it's like, if anyone, wants to advocate digital democracy, it's the same thing. It's very, like, touchy for people. It's a political party. So the best thing you can do, is just ask people what their opinion of something is, and then be like, gee whiz, don't you wish you could express that with any power? That's the real basic, trying to keep that message going. Yeah, I think so.
So there's an interesting point that's been raised by Josephine in the chat here. So the idea of, like, the exploitation of a general reaction to danger that most humans have. So she uses Adani as the example. And this is sort of interesting. She says people may vote for their jobs and not be concerned about long-term environmental consequences. Both things are a danger. It matters which, like, how do you see that? In the sense that if you're someone who's looking for a job at Adani, and I'm not talking about, like, geophysicists, I mean the majority of the people who would be employed there, they probably do feel like they're in danger. It's different to the way that people who are not in that close environment feel like there's danger. It's difficult to say that one thing is right and one thing is wrong. What we can say, though, is that when these sorts of issues come before a system like issue-based direct democracy, as opposed to a straight-up like direct democracy style vote, which is essentially what Parliament is. It's just a very small population, and a very particular population. But when something like this happens, like we talked before about the idea of these things going back and forward, about the idea of like this interaction between the existing votes or the votes that already happen on this issue, informing voters about how they should vote again if this issue were to come up. And if you think about it from the point of view of someone on the environmental side, then they have this, I guess, a bit of a dichotomy to contend with. And that is, do I try and push for the most extreme thing I can, and essentially put these people potentially offside, or, continue to keep them offside, to which they will fight as hard as they can because they perceive that their livelihoods are at risk? Or do I try and find a way that is more acceptable to both parties? And the same is true from the other side, in that the people who feel like their livelihoods are at risk, do they push for the most security they perceivably can have, and consequently, put environmentalists offside? Or do they try and find another sort of like compromise that might still let them have jobs, still keep most of them employed, maybe even keep more of them employed, but is not as egregious from the other side's point of view? And the important thing here is that it doesn't sort of... It's... A lot of the time, it doesn't matter how right and wrong these people are. It matters that they care, and that the idea of solving problems in a democracy is ultimately solving problems that we can get, all of us can get behind as much as is possible, I guess. That we're able to collaborate to try and solve problems in an acceptable way as opposed to an unacceptable way, and have that unacceptable way enforced upon a large section of society, like 45%. That sort of thing, I think, is what we really want to avoid here. The best outcome, realistically, from all of these sorts of problems is not that one side gets their way. It's not that we just end up with this mishmash of both sides' ideas where half the people get jobs and half the environment is saved. That's not the point of this, but the best way is that someone comes up with a new idea that has not been considered yet, that is superior in essence to everyone else's idea that was the case.
Right.
And yeah, being able to facilitate that, I think, is the main one of the main points of IBDD. One of the reasons that we should try and get behind it, because that's not something that any other system does. At least none that I know of, or if they do, it's a much softer effect.
Yeah, I think that's there's good. I'm trying to keep up with both what you're saying and banter in the chat, just because I think everyone's kind of getting it. It is like that's a point really worth kind of hammering home in like real simple terms. But when you think about all these political issues we think about nowadays, in regard representative democracy and political parties, making these things into divisive issues, it really is hard to think of one really divisive issue that doesn't have, or that wouldn't find some sort of outside answer that's hopefully better for both sides if they are so divisive. You're very rarely going to be split down to one side versus another side with no other opinions. And the fact that IBDD promotes that is the main point to that, I guess. Does that make sense?
That actually leads in to my next question real nicely. That is so a lot of Flux members who are already on board with the idea of IBDD and what we're doing as the Flux movement, come across this barrier, which is when they're explaining it to their friends and families and peers. A lot of the people that they're talking to usually have a lot of reservations because it's such a new foreign concept to them. And so in your experience, either Max or Ben can answer this, in your experience, how do you deal with your peers are, having reservations and reassuring them of their reservations, just like you have with this question here?
I'll take that because I normally come in, I guess,
and
a
answer
little
it in the
less
context.
philosophically based.
Yes,
Yeah,
answer it in
it's
the context of giving advice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really is a bit of there's a lot of things you really have to reframe, like that the reality of now no two issues, if you don't want them to be, are linked in any way, shape, or form. You don't have to take any part. You only ever have to take one single part of an ideology in your mind, and like for people to really comprehend that, then you can bring it back down to that, like. So imagine what is this issue? Like imagine the one issue, because a lot of people are like, what if everyone joined up and they all did this malicious thing? And it's obviously easy to see it when you're like, there's only ever been my team and the other team. But when you sometimes bring it back to like, no, you really have to remember this is issue-based direct democracy. It's only about one issue. So let's talk through your one issue, like, and see if just me and you can think of a third opinion or fourth opinion. And a lot of the time that's very helpful to people when, you come and you have to absorb so much. And I guess we're humans, so we just think of how we would game things. Like, but I could game it like this, which means evil people could do it. So it's really about keeping it really like, okay, what is the one issue? Let's go through it and see how it would work in our system versus the old system. Yeah. Bit of that, keeping it realpolitik, if I may.
Good. Max, do you want to add to that, or are we ready to?
I mean, most of my experience with trying to explain IBDD to people or communicate it has ultimately been with people who have already sort of gotten on board or are interested in it or things like that. I've not really, in the scheme of things, done that much chatting with friends. Partially because so many of my friends now are either on board or related to the movement in some way or whatever else. So I feel like in many ways I'm the worst person to answer that question. I have ideas, but my ideas are they're strategic and engineered and whatever else because they're ideas that I'm expected to give in front of lots of people. And to be honest, I take those ideas from people like Ben who have just gotten real with them in a way that I haven't been able to.
Stop it.
Good answer.
But yeah, that's hopefully where I'm coming from, like bottom level of like, what does this actually mean in real life to, everything you try, when you try to explain it, for me anyway, it's like, would my mum understand this? And would my sister understand this? And would, Du Bois, or like, take 3-4 sections of actual people you can think of. Because they're the ones that have to use it. Like, as much as we have to understand the super philosophy, for other people in a political sense, they just have to use it and feel the rewards that we're claiming. So, yeah.
And we actually have a page on the Flux website, don't we, of kind of common questions and their answers that go along with them, don't we?
There's a bit of that. It's it's one of those things, to be honest. We have not done an amazing job of updating that, and while we have various articles and things and resources, they're a bit spread out. We have not done as much as we could have to keep those organized, but it does exist.
It's my job.
So we've got a starting point. But yeah, there are some. We found it wasn't that effective, essentially, in terms of the FAQ type stuff. We'd write stuff up there and people would give us the same answers, so or the same questions, and so we've sort of tried to experiment with different ways. Part of which is these sort of discussions. Yep.
Perfect. All right, next question.
Should we?
So, yeah.
I was going to say we got some chat. So there's a few questions that we've missed, to be honest, and it's a bit difficult because obviously if we try to discuss things deeply, if our answers take longer than the rate of incoming questions, then we literally never get done. But we do have one that hopefully is is relatively straightforward. When and where are votes counted in the Flux system voting method? It's by Laraporo. The Flux system, or Flux the system as is quoted, sorry, misspoken, is essentially issue-based direct democracy. The idea here is we have a particular methodology of distributing votes and allowing people to reorganize and then to vote on things. So in terms of where they're counted on every auditor's computer. In terms of, and an auditor is just anyone who seeks to audit the vote. So in the same way that I'm struggling to remember the term in a scrutineer. So essentially, the term is the same. Anyone who wants to be a scrutineer, which can happen automatically, you can just in the app you can say download every vote, give me the results, and that will happen on your phone or your computer or whatever. It's really not that much in the scheme of things, with the exception of referendums where everyone has to vote. The data and storage overhead is really not that high. So to give you an idea, the entire Australian election is approximately 3 gigabytes, and it takes, on the order of 10 minutes to verify the entire thing on an iPhone via the technology we plan to use. We actually did a stress test of this in 2017, March 2017. So it's not that bad. And if you imagine the idea of like specialization and delegation coming into effect, then we expect 1 to 2 orders of magnitude drop in that at least. So, and keeping in mind that you don't have to keep the results once they're verified, you can sort of just throw the data away if you want. So download is the major thing if we're talking about a mobile phone. But yeah, we've got a number of chat things that have just popped up.
Yeah, we just got mashed. I was sitting there being like, oh, am I going to interrupt with 7 questions?
I feel like I need to readjust the chat window to make it a bit bigger. We've not taken into account the tomes.
Yeah, we literally thought it would just be us 3, and then, maybe...
This makes me really happy and really hopeful, though. Just like low-key. This feels really cool.
Yeah, this was whipped together last second, but the last second took a few hours to implement.
So the bummer about this... Sorry, as I've just realized, by changing the borders of the chat window there, it's now removed, like it's lost a bunch of the chat, which is a bummer.
Yeah, they're still on the Discord though, I think.
Discord seems a little lossy. Not everything is going there. So it seems like the only place that has everything is the actual
our own little chat thing, but we can see them all.
I might.
Yeah, I really thought I was going to be able to copy paste the 4 questions that we got over, and I never stop.
So we've just had a repost, but it's
Hey Travis.
G'day Travis. I was going to say we just had a repost a question. Does someone want to take that while I get the my chat up on the screen just for the sake of historical accuracy?
Oh, for sure. Oh, it's a tech question. This is yours, Kipling. Tech underling.
So is this the vote list is downloaded?
The voting list is downloaded from the central server. It's just a follow-up to Lara Poro's question.
Yeah. So essentially, all the votes will be available to everyone on a blockchain. So decentralized blockchain. So there's no central server per se. It's available to everyone. Ooh, we just lost.
Yep. No, I've that's the so for anyone who's familiar with OBS and things there, you can have studio mode or not studio mode, and if you don't have studio mode, you can do things like this, which happens live. And that's very useful for some things, but it's not amazing when you try and change things on the fly. So I'll just change it back to studio mode while I get the chat back up.
But anyway, that's the short answer. It'll be on a public ledger, all the votes, so there's no downloading from central servers.
Yeah, just to emphasize that, the idea is that all votes are so we batch them for the sake of efficiency. The batching algorithm is decentralized, it's peer-to-peer, there's no risk of censorship, and it's actually the same method as the vote anonymization, or tied very closely to it. When they're published via reference. Those references are able to be looked up on more efficient storage than the distributed ledger itself, blockchain, rather. Distributed ledgers are a weaker form of blockchain. They're sort of like a superset, but they don't have all the properties that we want, particularly the censorship resistance and things. So we are talking about a blockchain. We're not talking about just a generic distributed ledger, just for clarification. Yep. And anyway, the end result is that no one can prevent the ability for other people to share votes that have been published. And thus, with only a few honest actors, your entire network is resilient to orders of magnitudes higher in terms of dishonest actors. And so it's a very resilient system in that regard.
So are those vote clusters, are they per block? So one block vote cluster?
Potentially multiple ones per block. That's not an issue.
Okay.
The main idea is that you just have to prevent things being double votes, essentially. You have to prevent people dishonestly voting twice. That's the main criteria. Votes do not need to be in sequence. The order of votes, in terms of how they're cast, doesn't matter, just as long as they're not contradictory in terms of the either the voters or if people vote twice, then there needs to be a protocol about replacement or something like that, a way to resolve it, basically. But that's not a difficult technical problem.
Yep. And in terms of choosing a blockchain to put it on, what have you chosen and why?
So we have some prototype stuff written on Ethereum, or written on top of the Ethereum, I guess, what would you call it? Virtual machine type thing, as in its Solidity code, is what that means. That is working with, had it deployed on public and private chains. That's mostly a pragmatic decision. It's not the end goal. It's not good enough for the end goal. What we do want to do is have a custom second layer chain that's what our proof of concept was based on. It's a lot of work in the scheme of things, but it provides us with a level of scalability and technical autonomy that other things don't even come close. So that's why we're pursuing that slowly in the background. But also, it's, I guess, the thing that we need the least right now. Right now, we need the ability to prove the technology, to get stuff in action, things like that. Upgrading later is something that we can do. We don't need to focus on trying to implement perfect things on day one.
Yep. And with using...
I'm gonna lean in and push my "this is getting way too nerdy" button, if I may.
Okay. Yep.
It's getting way too nerdy now.
Well, maybe this can be its own, session in itself. We're doing mad nerdy one where we get deep into blockchain and.
I do hope we got Laraporo's question, but oh god, that went deep. I glazed over for a bit.
I don't blame you.
But so, do we think we should jump back through our chat questions?
Yeah, do that.
Going down our theme, which was getting tech related, so hence why I was pulling the trigger. So we've got some good banter.
I think there was one question for you, Ben, which was surrounding using voting on Facebook, like how you can vote and do polls on Facebook.
Nathan suggesting we do polls. Yeah, I flip that coin so often. I think yes, because we're the polling party. If you look at us really basically, and people should, on our social media, should think about polling. No, because I don't ever want to stand by the results of a Facebook poll as a political party. So it's a bit of a hard one, that one. So hence why I play safe and don't do them.
Facebook is
probably would make sense.
It's a jungle out there.
Yeah, it's like polling makes sense because that's our party, but like Facebook polling is the direct anathema to our very verified, legitimate voting. That's why I don't touch on it. But yeah, it's a good idea.
I mean, I guess the worry, I guess, if we can call it that, is we don't want to be someone who says that we have a secure voting system and then, oh yeah, by the way, we're running this event and we're using SurveyMonkey. That's like engagement is one thing, but we'd have to do a lot of work in terms of we'd have to create like an app with Facebook. We couldn't just use the Facebook voting thing. We'd have to get people to like register via a single sign-on type thing. This, by the way, would mean that we would know how they vote on various Facebook stuff. It's not particularly information that we want to even be party to for a temporary period. Facebook it's just a kettle of fish.
It is a kettle of fish. That's all. Yeah. So, all right, we've got another one just that's which is a good one because it's like I think this is a weird one for us to answer. But we have to answer it. If you manage to get a representative into Parliament, how is it going to work with the normal representative? They're assumed to be an autonomous actor in the Parliament. So, AKA, how are we going to make how are we going to make our MPs actually vote? How the app displays to them?
Good question.
I was going to say that wasn't for me, was it? I'm just
that was sort of you. Otherwise, I can take it. I just phrased the question, so it's confusing me now. But I think this is like, for a lot of people, a big sticking point. That this person can go rogue at any moment. And I think for a lot of people think that would just destroy Flux, but in reality, it shouldn't and wouldn't. It would destroy that person who has now proved themselves to never be trustworthy as a representative towards us. So it's like, legally, and it is in the current state of representation, it is a good system that, parties can't make you sign a contract or like punish you for not voting how they want you to. So for us, it's more the fact that those people have now just openly backstabbed their entire community and the open voting. It hasn't broken Flux. It hasn't broken people's ability to vote on issues. That specific person just used this rule. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely in the case of something like that. It's obviously, particularly in the beginning, quite a blow to us if that happens.
Yes.
We don't want that. We want to. This is one of the reasons that we don't do, for example, like an open election on who should be our candidates, because that would make us more vulnerable to this if that person were to be elected.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I think as well, in a typical political situation, someone can go rogue against a party and maintain integrity, because they have other, like, they can say the party's values drifted from mine, I'm representing my people, etc. If someone, like, you don't have that excuse with Flux, because you've stood up there and said, I believe that this is the best way to solve problems, that I believe that I should be the person to do this, and presumably if I have an issue with this, then I'm going to raise it before I try and do something drastic, and moreover that my opinions are less important than all of yours. So to then go rogue is an entire departure from that, and I think that the impact on one's reputation or on the perception of one is such that that's a pretty negative social consequence for doing that. I don't know if anyone would realistically... If people tried, it's not like they would have a political career to go back to. So we have a little bit of a fortunate position because of that, but the reality is it is a risk, and it's something that we, within today's legal framework, are not able to solve via contract law. For example, we can't go out of jurisdiction because of Section 44. There's, like, our hands are pretty tied on what we could do to try and solve that problem, besides choose people with integrity. That's it.
Yeah, it's that. It really is. It's that, yeah. We pick people with integrity because they understand that they're going for this reason only to represent this app, not to side with the political party that best upholds their X view. Yeah, it would be to so as soon as they do it, they're now completely debunked as having any ability to say what they stand for ever again. Like, it kicks them out of politics, and it kind of embarrasses us, but we keep rolling. So it's the best way to put it, really.
And what, especially during, you know, the beginning of Flux, one of the reasons that we attempt to create a relationship between our candidates and obviously the rest of the party is to help create a level of trust. And so that level of trust is important, you know, to give us peace of mind that, oh yeah, that candidate, especially a top candidate, is, you know, going to be someone we know we're, you know, 99% confident, or, you know, 99.99% confident that they'll be, you know, gung-ho on IBDD and upholding the values of the Flux group.
Oh, fat boy. First, let's let my cat.
Is that your cat?
No, it's my little mean boy.
So we're almost reaching the hour-and-a-half mark. Shall we start wrapping up?
I think so. I'm going to copy-paste every question that we've missed, and I will make sure they are at least answered in our Discord, if not in the next version of this, because I know we've missed, I'm going to say 6 or 7. So we'll copy them all out and make sure that everything does get answered, and maybe we'll hit this will be round 2, but yeah, I'm probably close to weaning myself, boys.
I think it's 11 o'clock Sydney time at least.
Yeah.
Well, for all of us, right?
I can't believe how many people turned out, and I thank you so much.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you, everyone.
I
it's
really
really
didn't expect
good.
a single person.
And if
I
anyone
told my
wants
girlfriend
have
to watch this, and I didn't expect her to.
Yeah. I was going to say, if anyone wants to have a more one-on-one chat with any of us, we're here. We're on Discord Monday nights. Most Monday nights we hang out 9:30 p.m. Sydney time. So if you're in Perth or wherever else, you can do the math and figure out what time that is for you. And yeah, we'd love to, you know, have.
But we're also just on the internet all the time, so
yeah,
hit us up.
Yep.
Just to finish up there, Josephine's just asked, would a representative of the Flux Party, would they read arguments in Parliament? I presume that's the consequence. Would they read arguments as voted on by the party, or would they not take part? On the one hand, the debate that they're reacting to in terms of the decision is going to come out of people, and that debate is already going to have happened outside. I see no reason they couldn't read statements from people, particularly people who are significantly invested in issues. There's no reason to say that we shouldn't do that, just because, I mean, why would we not? It doesn't harm the party or the movement if it's read appropriately. It just has to be. It's not the parliamentarians' viewpoint. It's just like, these are the issues that people care about, and I am here to represent like those statements in Parliament. And I think not doing that is essentially a waste. So yeah, I don't see any reason that would not be the case. It's just they've got to be appropriate, and we've got to read them correctly in the in the right manner.
Yeah, I imagine it being something like, you know, Guy Sebastian has this question about, you know, copyright amendments, you know, and it'll be read out.
You brought it back with the Guy Sebastian.
Man, blast from the past, that is. He's still around.
He's still relevant, yeah.
No, he's still relevant. That's a different question with a different answer.
Yeah.
Fair.
Alrighty.
All right.
Again, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks,
it's
everyone,
been
for tuning
fantastic.
in.
Really appreciate it.
Outro music.
Oh yeah. Hey. Okay, yeah. Hold up. Let me. I'll change back to the thing. So this is where the magic happens.
Here it comes. Magic, everyone.
Discord, etc. Now we need VLC. There we go.
Play.
So if anyone's wondering, Flux 34 space open paren 1 close paren .mp3. That's where it's at. I gotta turn the volume up first.
Flux theme
I
song.
can fade in.
We'll be licensing it.